Marcus Thompson stepped out of his expensive rental car at the ancient castle gates, already annoyed by the long drive through the countryside. The American businessman had money, and he made sure everyone knew it. His designer clothes, gold watch, and arrogant attitude announced his wealth to anyone within 50 feet. The castle was one of Europe's most famous historical sites, drawing thousands of visitors each year. But Marcus wasn't there to learn about history or culture. His company was considering buying the land around the castle for a luxury resort development, and he wanted to see what all the fuss was about. At the entrance stood William Harrison, a 65-year-old security guard who had worked at the castle for over 30 years. William took pride in his job, treating every visitor with respect while ensuring the ancient building's protection. His uniform was always clean and pressed, his silver hair neatly combed, and his weathered face showed the wisdom of decades spent serving others. Marcus approached the entrance with his usual swagger, talking loudly on his phone about million-dollar deals. He barely glanced at William as he walked past the security checkpoint, ignoring the polite request to show his ticket. "Excuse me, sir?" William called out in his gentle but firm voice. "I need to see your entrance ticket before you can enter the castle grounds." Marcus stopped abruptly, ending his phone call with an irritated sigh. He turned around, his face already showing displeasure at being interrupted. The businessman looked William up and down with obvious disdain, taking in the modest uniform and humble appearance of the elderly guard. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus demanded, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Development Corporation. We're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't need to show you anything." William remained calm and professional despite the rude tone. He had dealt with difficult visitors before, though few had been quite so openly hostile. "I understand you're an important person, Mr. Thompson, but castle policy requires all visitors to show their tickets. It's for everyone's safety and security." Marcus's face reddened with anger. How dare this nobody in a cheap uniform tell him what to do? He was used to people bowing down to his wealth and power, not standing up to him. The thought that a simple security guard would have the nerve to stop him made his blood boil. "Listen here, old man," Marcus snarled, stepping closer to William. "I could buy this entire castle with my pocket change. Your pathetic little job depends on people like me visiting this dump. Now get out of my way before I have you fired." Other tourists nearby began to notice the commotion. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. Children pressed closer to their parents, sensing the tension in the air. William could feel all eyes on him, but he didn't back down. "Sir, I'm just doing my job," William replied calmly. "Everyone follows the same rules here, regardless of their background. If you have a ticket, this will only take a moment." Marcus's anger reached a boiling point. He wasn't used to anyone standing up to him, especially not some old security guard who probably made minimum wage. In his world of corporate power plays and intimidation tactics, people usually backed down when faced with his wealth and aggressive personality. "You want to see what I think of your stupid rules?" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing across the castle courtyard. Without warning, he gathered saliva in his mouth and spat directly at William's face. The disgusting act shocked everyone watching. Tourists gasped in horror, parents covered their children's eyes, and several people started recording with their phones. William stood frozen for a moment, the spit dripping down his cheek, his dignity attacked in the most humiliating way possible. But William Harrison was not just any security guard. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody at the castle knew, was William's extraordinary past. Before taking this quiet job in his retirement years, William had served as a highly decorated officer in the British Special Forces. He had led dangerous missions, commanded respect from hardened soldiers, and received honors from the highest levels of government. After his military service, William had spent 15 years as the head of security for the royal family themselves. He had protected kings and queens, presidents, and prime ministers. He had been trusted with state secrets and had access to the most powerful people in the world. But he never talked about his past, preferring the peaceful life of a castle guard. Marcus smirked with satisfaction, thinking he had won this confrontation. "There," he said smugly. That's what I think of you and your pathetic authority. Now, are you going to let me through? Or do I need to call my lawyers? William slowly wiped his face with a handkerchief, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. His military training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, to think strategically rather than react emotionally. He had faced down armed terrorists and international criminals. So one spoiled businessman didn't intimidate him, sir, William said quietly, his voice carrying a new edge of steel that made several tourists step back. You have just assaulted a security officer on government property. This incident will be reported to the proper authorities. Marcus laughed mockingly. Go ahead and report it, old man. My lawyers will crush any charges you try to bring. Do you have any idea how much power I have? I could ruin your life with one phone call. What Marcus didn't notice was that William had already pressed a small button on his radio, alerting castle security to the situation. He also didn't see William's subtle hand signal to the security cameras, indicating that everything should be recorded for evidence. The crowd of tourists continued to grow, with many people now openly recording the confrontation on their phones. Marcus seemed to enjoy the attention, thinking it proved his dominance over the situation. He straightened his expensive tie and smiled arrogantly at the gathering crowd. Let this be a lesson to all of you, Marcus announced loudly. This is what happens when nobodies try to mess with their betters. Money talks, and everything else walks. But William Harrison was already 3 steps ahead, his mind working like the trained operative he had once been. Within minutes, the castle's backup security team arrived, along with local police officers who had been patrolling nearby. Marcus watched them approach with amusement, still convinced that his wealth and status would protect him from any real consequences. Officers, Marcus called out confidently, I'm glad you're here. This man has been harassing me and preventing me from entering a public building. I demand he be removed from his position immediately. The lead police officer, Sergeant Davies, looked between Marcus and William with a professional expression. Davies had worked with William before and knew him to be one of the most respected staff members at the castle. He also noticed the phones recording everything and the crowd of upset tourists. Sir, Sergeant Davies addressed Marcus. We've received reports of an assault. Several witnesses say you spat on this security officer. Is that correct? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. So what if I did? The man was being unreasonable and rude. Sometimes you have to put people in their place. Besides, it's just spit. It's not like I hit him. The officer's expression hardened. Assault was assault, regardless of the method. Sir, spitting on someone is considered assault under British law. I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning. Are you kidding me? Marcus exploded. Do you know who you're dealing with? I'm Marcus Thompson, CEO of a major American corporation. I have diplomatic contacts and lawyers who will make your life hell if you arrest me over something this trivial. But what Marcus didn't know was that William had already made a phone call of his own, using an old encrypted phone he kept for emergencies. William had contacted someone from his past life, someone with the authority to check Marcus Thompson's background through international databases. The information that came back was very interesting indeed. Marcus Thompson's company was currently under investigation by the FBI for money laundering and tax evasion. There were also several outstanding warrants for his arrest in different states. Though he had been avoiding them by staying overseas, William received this information through a discreet text message while Marcus continued his angry tirade at the police officers. The former Special Forces officer smiled slightly, knowing that justice was about to be served in a way Marcus never expected. Officers, William said quietly, approaching Sergeant Davies. I believe you should run Mr. Thompson's passport through your international database. I have reason to believe there may be some outstanding issues with his legal status. Marcus's face went pale. How could this nobody security guard possibly know about his legal troubles? He had been careful to keep his problems quiet, using his wealth and connections to stay one step ahead of the law. That's ridiculous. Marcus shouted, but his voice now carried a note of panic. This man is obviously making things up to get revenge. You can't possibly take the word of a minimum wage security guard over a successful businessman. But Sergeant Davies was already on his radio, requesting a background check on Marcus Thompson. The results would take only a few minutes to come back, but Marcus could see his carefully constructed world starting to crumble around him. The tourists continued recording, fascinated by the dramatic turn of events. What had started as a simple confrontation between a rude tourist and a security guard was becoming something much more significant. The radio crackled to life as the background check results came through. Sergeant Davies listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Marcus watched nervously, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Mr. Thompson," the sergeant said formally, "according to our international database, you have 3 outstanding arrest warrants in the United States for fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. You're also flagged as a flight risk who has been avoiding law enforcement." By staying in countries without extradition treaties, the color drained from Marcus's face completely. His legs felt weak, and he had to lean against a nearby wall for support. The smug grin that had been permanently fixed on his face just moments before was now replaced by a look of pure terror. "That's impossible," Marcus stammered weakly. "There must be some mistake. I'm a legitimate businessman. My lawyers said those charges would never stick." William stepped forward, his military bearing now clearly visible to anyone paying attention. "Mr. Thompson, I think it's time you learned that actions have consequences, regardless of how much money you think you have." The crowd of tourists watched in amazement as police officers moved to arrest the man who had been so arrogant just minutes before. Several people cheered quietly, having witnessed Marcus's disgusting behavior toward the respectful security guard. But William wasn't finished yet. He approached Sergeant Davies and spoke quietly in his ear, sharing some additional information that made the officer's eyes widen in surprise. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sergeant Davies announced to the crowd, "I'd like you to meet someone very special. This man you've seen being assaulted today is not just a castle security guard. This is William Harrison, former colonel in Her Majesty's Special Forces, recipient of the Distinguished Service Order, and former head of security for the royal family." The crowd gasped in shock and amazement. The humble, quiet man they had seen being humiliated was actually a decorated war hero who had served at the highest levels of British government and military. Marcus's jaw dropped open. He had spat on a former Special Forces colonel, a man who had protected royalty and served his country with distinction. The realization of what he had done hit him like a physical blow. "But how?" Marcus whispered, looking at William with newfound fear and respect. "Why didn't you say anything? Why are you working as a security guard?" William looked at Marcus with calm dignity. "I choose to work here because I believe in service. Mr. Thompson, after 30 years of protecting others in dangerous situations around the world, I enjoy the peaceful work of helping tourists appreciate history and culture. I don't need to boast about my past to feel important." The contrast between the two men became crystal clear to everyone watching. On one side was Marcus, who used his wealth to intimidate and belittle others, who thought money made him better than everyone else. On the other side was William, who had achieved real honor and distinction through service to others, yet remained humble and respectful to everyone he met. "You see," William continued, "true strength doesn't come from having money or trying to make others feel small. It comes from treating everyone with dignity and using whatever power you have to help rather than harm." Marcus was now in handcuffs, his expensive clothes disheveled, his arrogant facade completely shattered. As Marcus was being led away in handcuffs, the full weight of his situation began to sink in. His arrest at the castle was being recorded by dozens of tourists, and he knew the videos would soon be spreading across social media. His carefully maintained image as a successful businessman was about to be destroyed forever. "Please," Marcus begged the officers, "can't we work something out? I have money. I can make donations to police charities. This is all just a big misunderstanding." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The officers had their duty to perform, and William Harrison was not the type of man whose assault would be ignored, regardless of who committed it. Word of the incident spread quickly through the castle grounds. Other staff members who had worked with William for years began sharing stories about their beloved colleague. They told tourists about how William always arrived early to help with preparations, how he stayed late to ensure everyone was safe, and how he had quietly helped countless visitors over the years without ever seeking recognition. The castle's director, Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, hurried to the scene when she heard about the incident. She had known William for decades and was one of the few people who knew about his distinguished military background. "William," she said with concern, "are you all right? I can't believe someone would treat you so disgracefully." William smiled gently at his supervisor. "I'm perfectly fine, Elizabeth. It takes more than one rude individual to upset me. Besides, I think this incident has taught some valuable lessons to everyone who witnessed it." The crowd of tourists began approaching William, many wanting to shake his hand or simply thank him for his service to their country. Children who had been frightened by Marcus's aggressive behavior now looked at William with admiration and respect. An elderly woman from Germany stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Sir," she said in accented English, "my grandfather fought against British forces during the war, but he always said he respected soldiers who served with honor. Thank you for showing us what real dignity looks like." A young American college student who had recorded the entire incident approached William nervously. "Mr. Harrison, would it be okay if I shared this video online? I think people need to see how you handled this situation. You stayed calm and professional, even when that awful man was attacking you." William considered the request carefully. He had always preferred to stay out of the spotlight. But perhaps this incident could serve a greater purpose. "Young man," William replied thoughtfully, "if sharing this story helps people understand the importance of treating others with respect, regardless of their position in life, then yes, you have my permission." As the police car drove away with Marcus in the back seat, the disgraced businessman could see through the rear window as tourists surrounded William, eager to hear his stories and thank him for his service. The man he had tried to humiliate was now being celebrated as a hero. Marcus's expensive phone rang constantly with calls from lawyers, business partners, and media representatives who had already heard about his arrest. His company's stock price was plummeting as news of his legal troubles spread. The empire he had built through arrogance and intimidation was crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, William returned to his post at the castle entrance, greeting each new visitor with the same warm smile and professional courtesy he had shown for 30 years. 6 months later, the story of Marcus Thompson and William Harrison had become famous around the world. The video of the incident had been viewed millions of times, with people from every continent praising William's grace under pressure and condemning Marcus's disgusting behavior. Marcus Thompson was now serving a 5-year prison sentence after being extradited to the United States. His company had collapsed completely, his assets had been seized by the government, and his former business associates wanted nothing to do with him. He spent his days in a small prison cell, no longer able to intimidate anyone or hide behind his wealth. During his trial, Marcus had written a letter to William, apologizing for his behavior and expressing his shame for how he had acted. The letter revealed a broken man who finally understood that money without character meant nothing. William had read the letter carefully and, in his characteristic kindness, had written back. His response was brief but meaningful, encouraging Marcus to use his time in prison to reflect on what truly mattered in life and to find ways to make amends for the harm he had caused. The castle had become even more popular after the incident, with visitors specifically asking to meet the famous William Harrison. The tourism board had offered to promote William as a celebrity attraction, but he had politely declined, preferring to continue his quiet work of helping people appreciate history. However, William had agreed to one special project. He began giving talks to local school groups about respect, service, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. His military stories fascinated the children, but his most important message was always about character over wealth. Remember, William would tell the students, "It doesn't matter how much money you have or what important job you might get someday. What matters is how you treat other people, especially those who seem to have less power than you do." The incident had also inspired changes at the castle and other tourist attractions around the country. New policies were put in place to better protect staff from abusive visitors, and training programs were developed to help employees deal with difficult situations. Mrs. Hartwell had tried multiple times to promote William to a higher position with more pay and recognition, but he always declined. He was happy doing what he had always done, greeting visitors and ensuring their safety while they explored the historic site. On quiet days, William would sometimes think about Marcus Thompson and wonder if the man had learned anything from his experience. Prison was certainly a harsh teacher, but sometimes harsh lessons were necessary for people who had never learned to consider others. William never felt any satisfaction. From Marcus's downfall, his military training and personal values had taught him that justice wasn't about revenge, but about protecting others and maintaining order in society. He hoped that Marcus would eventually find a way to rebuild his life based on better principles. As the sun set over the ancient castle walls, William Harrison continued his rounds, checking doors and ensuring everything was secure for the night. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new stories, and new opportunities to serve others with the same quiet dignity that had defined his entire life. The incident that had started with such ugliness and hatred had ultimately become a story about the triumph of character over wealth, respect over arrogance, and service over selfishness. It reminded everyone who heard it that true nobility comes not from what you own, but from how you treat your fellow human beings. And in his small way, William Harrison continued to make the world a better place, one respectful interaction at a time.